From Carnegie China, this is China in the World. Engaging leading scholars and former policymakers on China's foreign policy and evolving global role. Brought to you by the East Asia-based Center of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace.
Welcome to this season of Carnegie China's China in the World podcast, where we will be exploring how states in East Asia manage their multifaceted security and economic concerns as they engage with the People's Republic of China. My name is Ian Chong. I'm a non-resident scholar with Carnegie China and an associate professor of political science at the National University of Singapore. This episode, we're going to turn our attention to South Korea. With us is Seung Kim, a professor at Korea University who works on political economy, specifically international political economy. She's also currently a visiting scholar with the Harvard-Yenching Institute. We also have Injoo Sohn, who is a professor at Seoul National University and deputy director of the Institute for Future Strategy. He's also deputy director and chair of the Global Korea Cluster.
Hi, Ian. Thanks for inviting me to Carnegie China podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm excited to join this podcast.
We have, I guess, a lot to cover. South Korea has very extensive and complex relations with the PRC. In a nutshell, can you help us just draw out the contours of the economic and security relationship between South Korea and the PRC?
Starting with South Korea's economic relationship with the PRC, I would say that China has long been and still is one of South Korea's most important economic partners. But with a few notable changes in trade and investment patterns, we've started to see its economic dependence on China declining over the past few years. So in terms of trade, China has been the largest export destination and also the largest source of imports for South Korea for more than 2 decades. China still remains South Korea's top trade partner, but the growth of South Korea's exports to China has slowed quite substantially. And in terms of investment, South Korean investment in China have declined as well, as many Korean firms either returned back home or moved its production facilities to the United States and also to countries in Southeast Asia and Latin America. So in a nutshell, China is still one of the most important economic partners, but we've started to see some decline in South Korea's dependence on the Chinese economy.
I want to add one point. Yeah, people-to-people exchange are picking back up. Tourism is back and cultural exchange are happening. But I need to stage more because China's economy is hurting. They need the boost. So Korea still needs China economically, but it's playing smart and staying connected, but without getting trapped and quietly preparing for rougher waters if U.S. China tensions heat up even more under the Trump administration, I guess.
Could you both also touch on the investment relationship and also the tech side of that investment relationship in particular? I mean, we know that the PRC, really is looking towards high-end chips. Korea is one of those places they're looking at. And also Korea, as you're looking at places to invest, Seung talked about shifts in investment. Can you roughly guide us through that process a little bit?
Right. So in terms of investment, I think the key factor was the intensified geopolitical tensions, especially between the U.S. and China. The trade war, of course, made it more costly to sell products from China to the global market. But more importantly, the U.S.-led restrictions on high-tech sectors such as semiconductors and batteries also pushed Korean firms to diversify their supply chains beyond China. So Korean firms have restructured their supply chains and diversified their production bases to reduce their reliance on China, especially in high-tech industry. So the new investment in high-tech industry in China from the Korean firms have substantially declined because of this uncertainty and the tight restrictions on high-tech sectors.
Yeah, I echo the Seung's points. Yes, Korean companies, especially the large, big companies, are pulling out of China fast. Beijing's trying to sweet talk Korean firms into staying, but it's clear Korean business are getting more cautious. And I want to point out economic security dimension. Back in July 2023, China rolled out export control on key minerals and things that are essential for high-tech industry. So they raised some serious red flags for country like South Korea, which depends on those materials. So how do Seoul respond? Pretty strategically, Korea now focus, Korean company and government also focus three things. First, beefing up their FTA network, free trade agreement networks. Second, opening and strengthening supply chain talk channels with United States, Europe, Japan, and even China. And the third, getting more involved in the multilateral institutions working on supply chain stabilities. China didn't just sit back, I found. They've been pushing what is called the fracture strategy, basically, to try to stop South Korea from getting too cozy with Washington's anti-China supply chain agenda. With Trump returning to the White House, the game plan in Seoul seems to be a bit shifting. Rather than aim for deeper cooperation with China, Republic of Korea is focused on stability. Thinking practical tools like a Korea-China supply chain coordination group and a direct hotline between two countries and export control talks, all aimed at managing risk, not necessarily expanding economic ties.
So I'm going to throw something else in here. So we also know that in the past decade or so, there have been several sort of spats between Beijing and Seoul that translated into export controls, the withdrawing of tourists. How did that all play up in the politics and economy for South Korea?
It's quite complicated. I think it's probably started from Seoul's deployment of THAAD, and the dispute over the deployment. It was like targeted against North Korean missile. It's the North Korean missile interceptor. So South Korea deployed it to defend against North Korean missiles, but China viewed it as a security threat directed at China itself. And in response, China imposed economic retaliation in many different forms. It targeted the supermarket chains in China, and it also refused a lot of imports at the border. So it affected trade and investment. And it was pretty costly, economically costly for South Korea, for those businesses based in China and also those dependent on the Chinese market. But I think this experience, the THAAD deployment and the retaliation by China that followed, shaped how South Korea thinks about its security and economic relationship with Beijing in two different ways. So on the one hand, it was a clear signal from Beijing that it was willing to use its economic pressure to influence Seoul's decision, and it was willing to weaponize economic interdependence to shape Seoul's policy, and also that going against Beijing's interests can be quite costly. So that was one message. But on the other hand, I think it also served as quite kind of a wake-up call for Seoul. So it made South Korea more aware of the risk of depending too heavily on the Chinese economy. It has also come to Seoul's attention that it is important to diversify its trade and investment ties and reduce its over-reliance on China. And this shift was also later reinforced by the U.S. China trade war and also like tighter regulations on high-tech sectors in China. So although it served as Beijing's interest because Beijing could flex its economic muscles, but it also raised concerns in Seoul about the dependence with the Chinese economy, which later pushed Korean economy to diversify beyond China.
So, Seung-Eun, you had mentioned the deployment of THAAD and the concerns from North Korea. Now, we know that also the PRC is one of North Korea's biggest backers. We also know that there have been these irregular gray zone kinds of I guess, standoffs in the Yellow Sea between fishermen and Coast Guard, some of which have actually gotten violent and bloody. And most recently, there was the erection of metal structures in the exclusive economic zone, and that led to another round of standoffs between the Coast Guards on both sides. So how do you see the security aspect of the PRC-South Korea relationship?
Yes, now South Korea got its eyes wide open on China from sort of sneaky moves in Korean waters to playing soft on North Korea. I see that Seoul is talking nice, but gradually building backup plans. First of all, it's North Korea issue, as you mentioned. China talks a good game about wanting a denuclearized Korean Peninsula, but when push comes to shove, they're pretty passive. Lately, they've been started calling North Korea's provocation reasonable concern, which doesn't exactly say we are helping, right? Furthermore, there's a West Sea or Yellow Sea. It's a big worries here in Korea. Chinese ships and survey vessels, even military planes are popping up more and more in Korean waters and airspace. And also we see China's installing a marine buoys and building aquaculture farms, fish farms in contested waters like Yellow Sea. It's not just about fish. It's about pushing boundary. It's about control of the Yellow Sea. So it's a bit concerned, nervous for Korean side, and now Korea is started to getting backup plans, allies options if things get mess.
Yeah, totally agreed on those two factors. So to add a little bit, like South Korea's major security concerns, of course, usually centers around the North Korea factors, and as Injoo mentioned, Seoul in the past has been hopeful for Beijing to play some roles in pushing North Korea's denuclearization, but I think Seoul also has now like realized its limit to play an active role there. So I think that hope has faded, and also the North Korea factor was why South Korea also wanted to have some kind of cooperative relationship with China because of its huge influence over Pyongyang. It holds substantial political and economic leverage over Pyongyang, like more than any other country. But Seoul has become more realistic about Beijing's willingness and its limits in influence. And the maritime expansion, as Injoo mentioned, it's one clear example of how maritime disputes with PRC will continue to pose security threats for Seoul. And to add just one more dimension in security, I think beyond North Korea, I think South Korea is also concerned about broader regional risk related to Taiwan Strait as well. So although Seoul doesn't see itself as a direct party to tensions in Taiwan Strait, but there is a growing anxiety about a potential crisis because of its implication for regional stability. Contingents there, of course, would be destabilizing on its own, but for South Korea, there is also an added layer of concern because it could also trigger aggression from North Korea, because it could be seen as an opportunity for the North to act as kind of like divergent.
Yeah, so I want to throw something else in there. Yeah, I did notice that South Korean governments have become more aware of what is going on around the Taiwan Strait, but not just that. They have also become a lot more focused on what's happening in Southeast Asia, especially the South China Sea. There have been efforts to cooperate with Vietnam. There have been efforts to cooperate with the Philippines. And in fact, I believe South Korea is the largest seller of arms to Southeast Asia now. But that is, the sale is one thing, but there's also the transfer of Coast Guard ships and training for the Philippines. How does all that feature into South Korea's strategy? Given that, if we think about it, the PRC is a disputant in all these areas: Taiwan Strait, South China Sea. How do you see all these things fit together from Seoul's perspective?
Well, the it's related to regional order, maintenance, and South Korea. From the perspective of South Korea, well, we see maybe United States in the past. United States played the world police, but its red power is on the decline. Maybe the U.S. allies work together to help to maintain regional world order. So in that regard, with the growing capacity in South Korean side, South Korea trying to play more active role to maintain regional order. China, South Korea is trying to beef up maritime patrols and working tight with the United States and Japan, and getting ready for hybrid threats, basically anything between peacetime and full-on conflicts.
Yeah, I agree with Injoo's perspective here. So I think it could be seen as kind of broader movement from the South Korean side to join forces in the U.S.-led alliance, so strengthening of ties with U.S. led structure, U.S. alliance, and more cooperation with U.S. and Japan.
Just add more points, a few points. My colleagues at Seoul National University, and we worked and produced a new policy report and some policy suggestion for South Korea's new administration. We suggested South Korean government should expand Korea, U.S., Japan cooperation as a strategic response to uncertainty expected under second Trump administrations. So South Korea and Japan facing shared challenge such as tariffs and defense cost sharing and North Korean nuclear issues. And South Korea and Japan should engage in strategic team play to protect their respective national interests within a trilateral cooperation framework. While the U.S. is deepening its strategic competition with China, the ultimate blueprint for U.S.-China relations remains unclear. So we emphasize need for in-depth strategic consultation among Korea and United States and Japan. And to this end, Korea, U.S., Japan 2+2+2 format can serve as a cooperative platform that help prevent extreme confrontation between United States and China while managing China's complex challenge.
Want more on China's economic trajectory? China's Reform Imperative examines China's economic reforms and their impacts on the global economy. Curated by Carnegie China Senior Fellow Michael Pettis, China's Reform Imperative will focus on China's reform progress and on the challenges and opportunities Beijing faces along the way. Go to carnegieendowment.org/China-reform-imperative for more information.
I think the other thing to note is, if you look at South Korea as a country that needs to import and export quite a lot, that has, including fossil fuels still, that, your connectivity, that all goes through, the maritime space, which is increasingly challenged. So I guess where I want to go now for a moment is, we've talked about the security, we talked about the economics, so let's bring them two together. What's the sort of approach to managing these sort of complex, the interdependent side, but also the sort of competition, but trying to maintain stability in an increasingly uncertain set of circumstances?
I think it's really hard to come up with one very clear direction. In the past, we've observed that South Korea has emphasized its alliance with the U.S. in terms of security, while still maintaining the extensive economic ties with China, which now is difficult because of the geopolitical tension between the U.S. and China. So now that's become more challenging. So I think there are multi pole strategy that South Korea should take. One is as we've been observing in the past few years, South Korea needs to diversify its supply chain and economic partners. China is still an important market, and South Korea cannot really give up. But I think it will move into the direction to reduce its dependence on China, which also makes sense given that there is a change in the Chinese economy itself. It has emphasized self-sufficiency, and it imports less of South Korean intermediate goods. So in terms of trade and investment pattern, we will see more diversification. And in terms of security, I think we will continue to see the strengthening of the alliance with the U.S. and also trilateral cooperation with the U.S. and Japan. Although there is lingering uncertainty about the direction of U.S. foreign policy, especially under this administration, I think there is a concern about uncertainty about its about willingness and its direction. So that's still the factor that will influence South Korea's strategic calibration. But so far, I think we will see more of the direction towards the move to strengthen its military ties with the U.S. and along with Japan.
Right. So as Seung-Eun was talking, Injoo had reached over and grabbed his, book. I think he's got the answers for us. Injoo.
Yeah, I already laid out all the answer to this new policy report. It's called Towards Core Resilience. Core resilience is our answer to that. So the Korea or Singapore, United States, like-minded country should work together to address China challenge. The like-minded countries should recognize country risk and potential for damage unfolding across global network and system. So the country should establish collective capacity for rapid recovery when challenge arise, when U.S.-China strategic rivalry, within U.S.-China rivalry. So we work together to constrain the exercise coercive power by potential aggressors. So resilience of supply chains, resilience of high-tech clusters, and resilience of military alliance network and sea lines of communication linked to the Korea must be strengthened. So we think about a lot of Indo-Pacific maritime cooperations and also the so-called alternative Asian supply chains. Those initiatives may help to maintain stability in the Pacific region.
Right. So I guess we've danced around this uncertainty that has been created by the Trump administration quite a few times. So I think maybe it's time we should address this more explicitly with the changes that the current Trump administration has brought in. How does that affect South Korea's attempts to manage its economic and security ties relating to the PRC? Noting that I think in the past, successive South Korean governments have alternated between being more wary and also trying to be more friendly. How does what is the approach now, given the sort of changed circumstances?
We went through very tough time politically, but we see democratic resilience. Korean president elections coming up, and if progressive candidates wins, you can bet there will be pressure to lean a little bit softer toward China, focus more on diplomacy, engagement, economic cooperations. But that's going to be clash with all hard security realities. Chinese ships in Korean waters, North Korea getting some cover from Beijing, and critical supply chain still vulnerable. So a progressive president might want to avoid confrontation, but the facts on the ground may not give them that luxury. And now Trump is back in the White House, and U.S. policy could swing widely, and Trump factor basically strip away the safe middle ground so Korea has been relying on for past decades. So with the possible progressive president at home and wildcard Trump abroad, South Korea's China Balancing Act is about to turn into high stake a tightrope walk. It's very, very difficult, I guess.
Yeah, Injoo raised an important set of points about the Korean policy and new president in South Korea and its relation with the new Trump administration. One interesting aspect that I want to highlight is that compared to the last presidential election and campaign in South Korea, where there was quite a clear divide in foreign policy directions between the two main candidates. The Liberal Party was more like pro China, whereas the Conservative Party was like more like pro United States, which is the quite common observation. But in this round of election, I think we are seeing some of the shift in the candidate position. So it's become more softer in talking about its relationship with the importance of China. So it now the candidate Lee Jae-myung is also emphasizing the U.S. alliance more than before, and also it also started to raise voice against China. So that is I think the new observation. So we need to see whether and how it will evolve when he's in office. And I think another important point related to that is public opinion in South Korea. So many tend to think that there is an ideological divide in South Korea, like conservative lean more toward the US and liberals more open to engagement with China. So you still see this divide in public opinion polls and how like legislators and policymakers have different views toward China. But having said that, overall views of China among the public are quite negative in both spectrums. So polls consistently show that like 70 to 80% of South Koreans hold unfavorable views of China. So some of the attempts to expand cooperation with Beijing may come with some domestic political risk if those policies aren't really like clearly explained or justified to the public. So that could act as a constraint to the new president in shaping its foreign policy.
So would there be any concern that there could be some sort of backlash or increased pressure coming from the PRC, given that PRC has been trying to woo Korea, and that from what both of you are saying, there's a lot of wariness, so Beijing may be a little bit disappointed?
Yes, I think it could also affect how South Korea thinks about its economic relationship with China. So although it has tried to reduce its dependence, still like in some of the industries and some of the products, South Korean industries are still like dependent on China. So I think South Korean policymakers should play smart, not to provoke Beijing's interest. So South Korea, I think, has been trying to emphasize U.S. alliance, and at the same time, it has also emphasized cooperation and maintaining cooperative ties with Beijing. And previously, under the conservative government, policymakers also tried hard to maintain this cooperation with Beijing. So I think that will be probably the game that we will observe. Although we will try to lean toward the U.S.-led alliance structure, but it's not going to imply that Seoul will discontinue the ties with Beijing. So we will try to achieve both goals as we've been trying historically over the past decades.
We should understand the impact of Trump-initiated trade war. the trade war significantly changed the trade landscape for China. China cannot afford to take a harsh approach to its neighboring country. China is now in big trouble. So the Xi Jinping now seems to be trying to smooth things over with neighboring country, visiting places like Vietnam, Malaysia, Cambodia. And I guess he will likely reach out to Korea too. So there's opportunity for Korea. Korea should engage with China, but also push for positive change, asking China to reduce non-tariff barriers and move beyond just export-driven model and expand the domestic demand. It's time to nudge things in a more constructive directions, I guess.
Right. So I guess this allows us to ease into the sort of last sort of area that I think we should explore a little bit. So given this changed strategic landscape, what are the challenges, tensions, or indeed opportunities do you see ahead, right? If we look forward into the horizon, as South Korea tries to manage its relationship with the PRC, both on the economic and security fronts.
I want to highlight two key factors that will shape Korea's foreign policy with PRC. Again, one is international factor, and the major factor is the U.S. foreign policy. So South Korea's approach to China depends a lot on how the U.S. deals with both China and also allies. So on there, we still wait to see how it will evolve, but that's the key factor that we need to pay attention. And also, as Injoo mentioned, I think that also create an opportunity for South Korea to play smart also with South Korea, because China will also need support, and it will be in China's interest if Seoul is with China on different issues.
I'm cautiously optimistic about Korea's position, Korean relation with China, also United States. As I mentioned earlier, trade war really triggered. A trade war really paved the way for the new opportunity for Korea to play a more constructive role. When President Trump slapped retaliatory tariffs on China and China struck back, it shook the U.S. financial markets. And then that's why when the U.S. picked a few countries for early trade talks, Korea made the list. So now it's being included in the early negotiation. Isn't necessarily a bad thing, but we need to prepare our cards carefully. Keep an eye on how U.S.-Japan talks, U.S.-India talks go, and definitely not rush into any quick deal. And I think Korea has a pretty strong hand. We've got what United States wants, advanced manufacturing. So instead of worrying about choosing side between U.S. and China, we should be asking, what kind of world order do we want? What can we do to help shape world order? That should be the basis of Korea's strategy. Trump's going big on tariffs, maybe too big. Now he's under pressure to deliver results. But that doesn't mean we should lay all our cards on the table or rush into deal. We should not reveal all our cards or rush negotiation just to be. So if Korea respond like an exemplary student to Trump table shaking tactics, we may ended up playing into his hands. So instead of thinking first about what we are going to give, we should focus on more what we can get from the United States and also China.
Wow, it's good to hear that. Yeah, it's really good to hear that you are being optimistic. Maybe I've been too pessimistic about observing tariff, and I'm now based in the U.S., so I was really worried about the rising cost and inflation as a result of tariffs. Yeah, but I will think and look at the positive side as you mentioned.
All right, so thank you so much. Sohn and Injoo, it was wonderful to have you both on, and it's always a pleasure to speak with both of you. I hope that our audience, our listeners, will have learned something about the Korea PRC relationship and in all its complexities. Thank you very much for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the China and the World podcast, a production of Carnegie China, the East Asia-based center of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Views expressed are those of the host and guest panelists, and not necessarily those of Carnegie China or the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Subscribe to the China and the World podcast on popular podcast platforms such as iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Learn more about Carnegie China at carnegiechina.org. Tim Martin is our audio engineer and producer, with help from Hee-Won Park and Wan Yi Du.